Om Shanti. Today is Christmas Eve, if you are Catholic, and I think the Russian Orthodox Church also. There are many who celebrate the 5th of January. So there are different beliefs and importance given. In Germany, a lot of importance is given to the day when the kings came, which is 5th of January. And for the Protestants, this would be Christmas Eve. And for the Catholics, Christmas is celebrated. But all of this is to do with midnight. So if you're before midnight, it's today. If you're after midnight, it's tomorrow. So yesterday we had, or day before yesterday, we had midnight. Does Shi Baba come 1 minute past midnight? So, Om Shanti. 24th December. Sweet children, the Father reminds you that you were pure. And while taking 84 births, you became impure. So no one has any good reason to feel guilty about being impure. Is that right? It's impossible not to become impure. It's like getting old. Now you have to become pure again. This is the only period of time where old things become new. Question, what question does the Father ask you children who are becoming sensible from senseless? Sensible means you have information and senseless means you don't have information. So it would be better to say those who understand from those who didn't understand. And what effort does Baba advise you to make? And the answer is, children, I gave you so much wealth. You had countless wealth. Where did you lose all your wealth? How did you become insolvent? And in India, they would say we became insolvent because people took over our country and took our stuff, right? That's what everyone would say. But Baba says it was mostly through all this expenditure on religious activities. This is where the money went. So there is a debate between those two questions. But mostly what people think and what God think don't fit together. How did Bharat, that was the golden sparrow, become like this? The Father now advises you, children, make effort once again, study Raj Yoga, and become the masters of heaven. So how was it possible for India to get conquered? Is because of body consciousness in India. Otherwise, it would not be possible. But in India, people don't know about this, so they don't think like this. Om Shanti. Whom are you children remembering here? Your unlimited Father. Where is he? People call out to him saying, "Oh, purifier," don't they? And nowadays the sannyasis say, Patit Pavan Sitaram, thinking of Ram as the purifier. They mix up the Silver Age Ram with Shiv Baba, who is also called Ram. You know, the main deity in Egypt was called Ra, you know? So it's close. So that is to say, O purifier, that is, they say, O purifier of us impure ones, come. Your children understand that the golden age is called the pure new world, and the iron age is called the impure old world. So impure means old and disintegrating. Where are you now sitting? At the end of the iron age. And this is why you call out to Baba to come and purify us. So who are we? I am a soul. Souls have to become pure. When souls become pure, they get pure bodies. And when souls are impure, they get impure bodies. So the body you get corresponds to your level of purity. This body is called a puppet of clay. Souls are imperishable, and the soul speaks and calls out through these organs. What is a body? It is a leather bag filled with warm mud, right? And when the soul is not there, it disintegrates very quickly. So the soul speaks and calls out through these organs, saying, I have become very impure, come and purify me. The Father purifies you, then Ravan, the vices, makes you impure. So you remember, Ravan is not just only the vices, but Ravan involves trying to attain power through use of weapons, and also getting people to believe ideas which are not true. So this, as well as the 5 vices, is Ravan. So the golden age is said to be pure, and the iron age is said to be impure. The Father has now reminded you, you were pure. Then you took 84 births. Now you are at the end of the last of your many births. You are now completing your 84 births. This is the human world tree, and I am its seed. You call out to me, saying, O Supreme Father, Supreme Soul. So I am God, the Father, the Liberator, and the Guide. And each of you says for yourself, liberate me, become my guide, and lead me to the world of peace, nirvana. Sannyasis also want to know how to receive permanent liberation. The world of peace is the incorporeal world from where souls come to play their part on the earth. Only souls, not bodies, reside there. And souls are there bodiless. That is called Shantidam, the world of silence, stillness, immobility, light. It is a viceless world where souls reside. The picture of the ladder has been explained to you children, showing how you have continued to descend the ladder. It took you 84 births to descend. 84 births are the maximum. Some even take only 1 birth. It could be all the way from 1 birth to 84 births. How many births have you had? You don't know. You assume 84. Why not? Souls continue to come down from up above. And the Father says, I have come to purify you. When children put the address on a letter to Baba, they write to Shiv Baba, care of Brahma Baba. Shiv Baba is the father of souls, and Brahma is called Adi Dev, the first created man, Adam. He's also Dada, the grandfather. The father enters Dada and says, "You called out to me, saying, 'O purifier, come.' Souls called out to me through their bodies." So the main thing is the soul. This is the land of sorrow. And here, people die like that suddenly. People have untimely death. Even small children die. There is no question of untimely death in the Golden Age, whereas here, people can die just anywhere. There are no such illnesses there. The very name is heaven. It's a good name. Whenever the name of heaven is mentioned, your hearts become happy. It is called the Golden Age, heaven, paradise, Vaikunt, Vahisht. The Christians say that 3,000 years before Christ, there was paradise. How do they say that? When do they say that? It is in the Christian Bible. They talk about God created paradise. And then after 1 week, they came out of paradise. It was very short. But at the end of the Bible, they say there will be paradise for 1,000 years. So the cycle of time in the Bible is 6,000 years, which is pretty close to 5,000 years. And they calculate that by the age of the people. So they write in the Bible, after this person, this one son, and this one son, and so on, so on, so on. And they calculate time by going through the descendants of Adam. And so this is how they know the time. They have 1 week, then they have time, because they say in the Bible that Adam and Eve were the first created people, and it took a week to make heaven. And then they say that Eve got an apple, and she gave it to Adam, who ate it. And this was called knowledge. And so they have this idea that if you have knowledge, it will take you to hell. Of course, here we say if you have knowledge, it'll take you to heaven. So it's totally the opposite. But they didn't say what kind of knowledge. And basically, it's something like knowledge of the body. And so when you have knowledge of the body, then you go to hell. When you have knowledge of the soul, you go to heaven. So that, of course, makes total sense. But it's not clarified in the Bible, the difference between knowledge of the soul and knowledge of the body. But anyway, it's very fast. They don't speak about any history of heaven. And then they fell down from paradise. So the depictions are falling down from up in the sky to down on earth and further into hell, further down. So for us, it would be a fall from soul consciousness to body consciousness. But they don't put it in those terms in Christianity. So this 3,000 years is the calculation all the way between God creating Adam and then Christ coming along. And then there is the New Testament. So the Old Testament is before Christ, and the New Testament is after Christ. Before Christ, there would be no Christians, right? The Old Testament is not Christianity. So in Christianity, you have for example, I don't know about now, but in the Catholicism, they don't allow the people to read the Old Testament, only the New Testament. Yeah. So then the Protestants, I have a background in Protestantism, and they have the whole Bible. And the Old Testament, the Quran, and the Torah are very similar to each other, because these are all Abrahamic religions. So this all came from Abraham. And then it divided Moses and Jews, and then Muhammad, Muslims, and then later on, Christ. The Old Testament and Judaism is the same time, or the same thing. It's all the same scripture. But people take the scripture some time ago, right? The scripture started with stories. And then every so often, the religions would have a conference, and they would sit down together, the authorities of the religion, and then they would write the stuff. And they say, this is, so that the Christianity, I don't know how all the other scriptures came into being, but in Christianity, they had two conferences. One was 300 years after Christ, the First Council of Nicaea. Then the Second Council of Nicaea was 800 years after Christ. And they decided what are the beliefs of Christianity at that time, and they wrote it down. And then 800 years after Christ, they had another conference, and then they changed it, and that's what you have now. That's what all this corresponds, all these scriptures that we have, as far as I can tell by my research, the actual written scriptures that people use at this time were put together in the beginning of the Iron Age. Although people believe that they were put together earlier, they were not actually put together earlier. There were some things that were part of Christianity that got removed. Yeah, definitely, it works like that. In the early part of Christianity, they did believe in reincarnation, but then that was removed. And in the early part of Christianity, all the priests were women. And then they deleted that from the history, but they're there. If you go back and you find out it was all women. Because in the early days, mostly all the spiritual power was held by women. Then it got taken by men, and they don't let women now. And now, present day, they're saying, no, women should have a right to do this. But, most of this historical record was removed. So it's a lot of work to find it. So when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the authorities of religion didn't want anyone to read them because they knew that it was different. And that their authority would be called into question, which it was. But that's it. So religions, as Baba says, they go through the golden, silver, copper, and iron period. And as you can see on the picture of the tree, all the religions, which are branches from the original trunk of Hinduism, which emerged from the seed of Shiv Baba. So all these religions also, they branch out into small subdivisions. And so there is a lot of variation of concepts. And the one with the maximum differences is Buddhism. So the people of Bharat do not know about this, Christianity. This is because they have seen a lot of happiness, and they're also seeing a lot of sorrow. So everyone goes from one extreme to the other. and Bharat goes to the highest and then to the lowest. So people of Bharat have become really Tamu Pradhan, and these are the ones who take 84 births, and the other people don't take so many births. After half the cycle, those of other religions come. So you now understand that the deities lived for half the cycle. 2,500 years was a civilization of deities. And there were no other religions at that time. And then when there was the kingdom of Ram in the Silver Age, there was still no Islam, no Buddhism. People are now in extreme darkness. And they say the duration of the world is hundreds of thousands of years. And this is why they think that the Iron Age is still young. There's still 40,000 years to go. But you now understand the duration of the Iron Age has come to an end, and now the Golden Age is to come. Therefore, you have come to the Father to claim your inheritance of heaven. All of you were residents of heaven, and the Father comes to establish heaven. So everyone will go home to Nirvana, the world of silence, and then, one by one, they will come down here as actors. A soul cannot speak without a body. So there, in the world of silence, because souls do not have bodies, they remain still. That is called the incorporeal world, the land, not the land, but the region of silence. These things are not mentioned in the scriptures. People created the scriptures. So on what basis did they create the scriptures? A combination of memories, inspirations, and things they figured out through their spiritual practices. So they're all man-made, and they're all in a little bit incoherent, and they don't have internal consistency, and there's a lot of self-contradiction in the scriptures. So they don't have much power because of those things. And Gyan is completely self-consistent, and that is a very important aspect of its power. You can answer any question, you can argue for any point, but in people who are based in scriptures, especially when Baba gives you this information, you can argue with authorities of scriptures quite effectively because they don't have full information. So this will happen sooner or later. A big court case Baba has predicted to prove who is right. So that means the Brahmins really need to know the Gyan well to do that. So these things, these scriptures, do not exist in the Golden Age. People do not perform any devotion, any rituals are there, and therefore there is no need for any scriptures. So many of the scriptures talk about how to perform rituals. Like one of the Vedas is totally about that. Deities do not worship anyone. That's why I say we can't say it's deity religion. You could say deity civilization. It is later on, thank you, that human beings, ordinary people, worship deities. That is the world of deities, and this is the world of, it says here, human beings, but the difference between deities and people who are not deities is the mortals or the immortals. There was the kingdom of deities, but that is no longer there. No one knows what happened to it. There used to be the dynasty of Lakshmi and Narayan, and you now have information about that. No other people have this knowledge. The Father comes and gives human beings, that means mortals, this knowledge through which the ordinary mortals can become deities, the immortals. You people come here specifically for the purpose of becoming deities. So deities do not eat impure food, that means non-vegetarian, and they don't smoke cigarettes. Deities, they are deities, whereas here, all are ordinary mortals. So the deities are pure, whereas these ordinary mortals are impure. The Father is sitting here speaking to the souls, and the souls are listening through their ears. These things are not mentioned in the scriptures. There is no Ravan in the Golden Age. There is no question of any sorrow there. Sorrow gradually begins later. Sorrow in the sense of hardship, lack. There in the world of heaven, you have plenty of wealth. So where Baba uses the word sorrow, you can understand it means poverty. On the path of devotion, you build temples. So first, there is the Somnath temple. And there you had large diamonds and jewels, so large that no one could put a value on them. The main thing is the Somnath temple, but all the kings must have built their own temples within their palaces because they began this activity of worship. So first of all, there is the worship of Shiva. So they didn't really worship, but they started to meditate with this light that they could see in this diamond, like in a cabochon cut of a diamond. The light in the diamond is like inside the diamond, and it's very beautiful. So they would meditate with that. Shiva is also called Somnath. Somnath means the giver of the nectar of knowledge. So Somnath means the Lord, or the God who gives nectar to you. And this is the nectar of knowledge, isn't it? The Father is sitting here explaining that only the Father is called the truth, Sat. The Father says, I come only in Bharat and make it into the land of truth. So the land of truth is where people know information about the world that is correct. Without this, how could all of you become deities? So I teach you all this. Shiv Baba carries out his activities through the medium of Brahma. And Brahma has become dark because this is the last of his many births. The light of the soul has become dim. And then he will become very bright and beautiful. They have a picture of Krishna showing him dark and fair. So there are many very good pictures in the museums that you can explain very well. So this differentiation between dark skin and light skin started off in the scriptures, but people took it as a reference to skin, and in fact is symbolic of the change in the soul from bright light to dim light. You know that you are going to the world of peace, your home. We are residents of that place. Then when we come here, to play our roles. You children should first of all have faith that it is not a sage or holy man teaching you here. Shiv Baba, the incorporeal Supreme Soul, through this ordinary body of Brahma. This man lived and sinned, but the one who entered into this man's body and speaks to you is the ocean of knowledge. No one knows him. He's secret. They call out, O God the Father, but no one knows his name, form, place, and time. And then they say that he is omnipresent. So ask them, where is God? And they will answer to you, who is they? This is the people who believe the knowledge of the Vedas, because it's in there. So they will answer to you that he is in every particle and he is in every being. But in fact, Baba says there is a soul in every body. And they call out to the Father, the Supreme Soul, saying, Baba, come and purify us impure ones. You call out to me to carry out this business and this service. So what is the business of purification? You give up your impurity and he in exchange gives you purity. That's the business. And the service is you cannot do anything about your condition. So he serves you by bringing you up to your highest level. So you tell me, come and make us dirty ones pure. You invite me into the impure world. The Father never sees the pure world because he can only see with the eyes of some body, right? You can't see without eyes. So Baba knows the golden age, but he doesn't see anything till he comes into the body of Brahma Baba. Interesting, huh? He has come to serve you in the impure world. This kingdom of Ravan is now to be destroyed. And you are studying Raj Yoga here, and then you will go there as the kings of kings. You have been made this countless times. First of all, there is the Brahmin clan. Prajapita Brahma is remembered, and he is also called Adam and Adi Dev. So in the Quran, he's called Adam. And the Bible is Adam. And Baba says, same person. You know. And I was telling you about Christianity and this idea, King of Kings, they use that in Christianity also. So in Christmas time, they say this Jesus was born to be King of Kings. That means it's Krishna, King of Kings, the emperor. So many stories of Jesus and Krishna are combined. And you cannot spread a religion without taking over what's already there. And this which is already there is basically what we call now Hinduism. But when Christianity was spread in the world, it was spread in that context. And so you take over whatever is there and absorb it into your new way. This is how it works. So there are many who come here and listen to this knowledge, and then they are influenced by Maya. While in the process of becoming pure punya atmas, they then become pap atmas, sinful souls. Maya is very powerful. Maya makes everyone into a sinful soul. Maya means that you come under the influence of sense perception, as well as the prevailing ideas. because it's not sense perception alone is not enough. It's the prevailing ideas that take you even more. So there is no single pure punya atma here, only in the golden age. Only the deities were pure souls, and when all become impure, then they call out to the Father. It is now the kingdom of Ravan, the impure world, and this is called a jungle of thorns. And the golden age is called a garden of flowers. In the Mughal gardens, there are first-class flowers. And you can even find uk flowers there. So the uk flower is a flower, it's a little white flower that they use for worship of Shiva that grows also in Mount Abu. And when you pick it, your fingers turn black, though it is a white juice that comes out like a dandelion. So no one understands the difference. Why do they offer the uk flowers to Shiva? It's because all the impure people come to Shiv Baba and then they get turned into roses. Do you have your thorns? Rose needs thorns, right? If the rose didn't need thorns, the rose would not also be such an important symbol. And the thorns are this establishment of boundaries. You don't allow your boundaries to be crossed. It's also symbolic for the king. The king has to not allow any enemies to come into the kingdom, so there has to be boundaries. So your first kingdom is yourself, and then you can manage a kingdom of many people. So the Father also explains this. It's like the boundaries of Madhuban Baba sometimes talks about. All these boundaries will be strongly enforced, that no impure people will be allowed to come into Madhuban. Impure means not practicing the disciplines, so and can't have the full atmosphere if you allow mixture, right? So everyone has had their boundaries invaded by something or another, and that has taken away your power. And so you have to undo the invasion of your boundaries as an interesting practice. The Father also explains this. When I teach you, some are first-class flowers, some are jasmine, some are very fragrant, and some are still uk. That means they become. They're all number-wise. So they all start out as uk flowers. Everybody comes basic human, and some people develop well, some not. So therefore, this world is called the world of sorrow, hardship, poverty, the land of death. And the golden age is called the land of immortality. So the immortals live in the golden age. Only the Father creates the new world. And he is called the knowledgeful one. He is the living seed. He is called the ocean of knowledge. It is not that he knows what is in each one, that he is antaryami. Antaryami means one who knows what's inside. Actually, if you go in front of him, you will be very clear that he knows everything what's inside, right? This is why people who are not clean can't go in front of him, because they can't handle being seen as he sees. So when people say that God knows what's going on in everyone, they are lying. It is correct to say that he is the ocean of knowledge and that he is the living seed. So he doesn't know, but he perceives, right? Those with whom he comes in direct connection. He knows the beginning, the middle, and the end of the world. And this is why he is called the ocean of knowledge. He is now giving you children the knowledge of the beginning, the middle, and the end of the world. And the cycle continues to turn. The golden, silver, copper, and iron ages. At the confluence age, the world changes. You are Raj Yogis who are now standing at the confluence. And the Father is sitting here teaching you. Those who become the children of the Father study Raj Yoga. The first and main thing is to understand that Baba is the Father, the Supreme Teacher, the Supreme Father. Shiv Baba is now teaching you. He is also your Satguru. He will take all of you back home. And that, going back home, is called the procession of Shiva. It's mentioned in Bhakti. God is teaching all of you devotees and making you into the residents, the dwellers of heaven. These things are not mentioned in the scriptures. This Dada studied many scriptures. The Father doesn't study scriptures. The Father himself is Sadgati Datta. He gives you Sadgati, takes you to the right destination. So he doesn't need to study any scriptures, but he refers to the scriptures. And in that, he just makes reference to the Gita. God spoke the Gita, the original Gita, which is now again being spoken, which is called the jewel of all scriptures. But the people of Bharat do not know who God is. And they say that the Father is omnipresent, and such a statement is defamation. They insult the Father, and this is why they become impure. So you have karma with people, karma with nature, and karma with God. So the people who are very religious, they believe the false information, and that makes them have negative karma with God. So Baba has said that the the religious authorities have actually betrayed the people, telling them the wrong thing. So, but they wouldn't like to hear about that. So, who will purify them? The one whom they have defamed so much comes and purifies them. It corrects the incorrect information so they can then think about God accurately. He says, I do altruistic service, nishkam. That means he doesn't get anything out of it. But I make you into the masters of the world. I myself do not become that. And in heaven, you do not remember me. There is a spiritual law. Everyone remembers God at the time of sorrow, and no one remembers God when they are happy. So you remember God from the Copper Age onwards. So this is called the play of happiness and sorrow. There are no other religions in heaven. They all come later. The Christians themselves say that heaven was 3,000 years before Christ, and there were no other religions. So in heaven, there are no religions at all. We souls were in the world of peace, And these things are not mentioned in any of the scriptures. The Father gives you Sadgati through this knowledge, which is called the Gita. So the specific purpose of the Gita is to make the mortals into immortals and to make the people in the world of conflict go to the world of heaven. So you call out to the Father to come and take you to heaven. Therefore, the old world must be destroyed. There will be many natural calamities and storms will come with a lot of force. The Father comes and makes you senseless ones, ignorant ones, into sensible, aware, knowledgeable. He says, I gave you so much wealth. You had countless wealth. Where did you lose all your wealth? The unlimited Father is asking you, what did you do with it? How did you become so insolvent? And you wasted your wealth for half the cycle, and so you became insolvent. Look at Bharat, which was called the golden sparrow, and what has it now become? So the purifier Father has come once again and is teaching you Raj Yoga. That is Hatha Yoga, and this is Raja Yoga. So Hatha Yoga, for example, the Raja Yoga that is described by Patanjali, this is called Hatha Yoga in God's eyes, and give the 8 limbs of yoga. So this Raja Yoga is for both men and women, whereas that Raja Yoga is taught only to men. The Father says, now make effort and definitely become the masters of heaven. This old world has to be destroyed, and there is just a short time left. War will also begin. And when you reach your karmatit stage and you are worthy to go to heaven, worthy in the sense of you're ready, then the atomic bombs will begin to be used. They will continue to manufacture them until then. Nevertheless, the Father tells you, children, continue to stay on the pilgrimage of remembrance. It is in this that Maya causes obstacles. Acha. To the sweetest, beloved, long lost and now found children, love, remembrance, and good morning from the Mother, the Father, Bap Dada. And the spiritual Father says Namaste to the spiritual children. The spiritual children say Namaste to the spiritual Father. For the essence for dharana, you are going to become deities. So your food and drink must be very pure. You must give up everything that is impure. Become a first-class flower. Become completely ready to go to heaven. Make effort to make your stage karmatit. So ready for heaven means all the old things of the Iron Age have to become dormant and wake up all the things for the Golden Age. The blessing is, may you be yogyukt and yukti-yukt and become memorable through your elevated actions. To the extent that each of your actions is elevated, accordingly you will be remembered among the elevated souls. On the path of devotion, they chant the names, but here elevated souls are remembered to be quoted as examples of their virtues and their actions, right? Who do people remember in BKs? Dadi Prakashmani, Dadi Gulzar, Didi Manmohini, Dadi Janki, all these are memorable people. On the basis of your elevated action, you will continue to become worthy of being remembered. That means memorable. For this, you have to be yogyukt. And by being yogyukt, every thought, word, and action of yours will definitely be yukti-yukt. Yogyukt means that you are, your level of yoga is high. You're doing enough yoga to have that level of your power high. And when it's high, then everything that you do will be correct. And when your yoga level is down, then you can't do things correctly. So it's about maintaining that level. Such souls cannot have any thoughts or actions that are not accurate. And there is also this connection, a connection between your level of yoga and your karma. So in the Gita, in the second chapter, it says the definition of yoga is skill in action. So this is what Baba's talking about. If you're yogyukt, you will be yukti-yukt. That means you will do the right thing, right time, right way. So we have to think about what exactly is yoga. As slogan, being an instrument with humility are qualifications of a true server. So there is this expression, nimit, nirman, and nirman. I can't make the difference in the pronunciation between the two kinds of nirman. Can you do it? There's nimit, instrument, and then nirman means without arrogance. And then nirman means you create. The word nirman, properly pronounced, means that you're a creator. And nirman means you don't have arrogance. So you have to think about the definitions of these things, because most people give definitions according to the Manusmriti, which is very different from definitions according to Gyan. So there is confusion about this. Because according to the Manusmriti, who has to be humble is the women, which means allow yourself to be downtrodden, and that's called humility, but it's actually not humility. It's enabling. And so humility is more like you're not motivated by a desire for recognition and acknowledgement and all the perks of someone who's in high position. So a person who's humble is not going to tell everybody how wonderful, marvelous, and fantastic they are. There are people who do that. But a person who's humble must be in their self-respect. So what happens in the conventional views about humility is they try to destroy people's self-respect. And then when a person is fully disempowered, they call that person humble, but that's totally wrong. But it's the patriarchal approach to humility. You put yourself up by putting everybody else down. And when you succeed in putting people down, then you say they're humble. But that's not humility. That's abuse. And it makes people very weak. And so it doesn't actually produce the kind of society that Baba is talking about. And so we have to really think about these definitions, and the conventional interpretation of these words actually causes psychological damage. And so it's not useful for us to go for that. Therefore, we have to think very carefully about everything that Baba says about how you should be. And one of the things that it speaks about in the Gita, Arjuna asks Krishna, what are the sanskaras of a yogi? And then these are described. And what you have in the BK world is this confluence between the ideas that come from Vedic India and the ideas that come from Shiv Baba. And then there are other ideas which come from pre-Vedic India, which are contained in some of the legends and myths, but because they're very ancient and the description of these is difficult to comprehend because it's all symbolic, and people mix up the symbols with the reality and the reality with symbols and get it very mixed up, very tangled. Sometimes Baba says that bhakti is very tangled and that he comes to disentangle everything. So he gives these keys, and we have to use the keys to undo the damaging effect of people's ideas about how to run the society. Which means that you're doing something completely new. And there are very few people who realize the difference between this, what I call toxic conventional morality, and then what Baba tells about how a person should be. And it's a very, very interesting study to do. So we should do that so that we get it right. But it's very difficult to get it right because you use the same words and then someone will interpret a word in one way, which is like wrong. And then Baba will give you the interpretation of that word right, but they'll take it wrong because they're used to it. So we have to understand about people's mentality. And one thing that I have observed is that when people hear something, they do not hear what is said to them. They hear what is activated in terms of what they already have heard about that. And so they don't actually hear what you say to them. They just remember what they were told on that subject, and it gets in the way, so that what they hear from Gyan doesn't actually go in. It just activates what they heard from Bhakti. And there's very few people who can see that that's going on. So when Baba talks about the importance of yoga, I think yoga is good for distinguishing between what Baba is saying and what you have heard in Bhakti. So there's a problem. One problem is that if you have had a great deal of Bhakti and you're full of all these ideas, when you come to Gyan, you will consider it as a verification of those Bhakti ideas. But you're actually deceiving yourself because it's actually challenging those Bhakti ideas, but you don't get it, you don't see it. And so there are many, many people who have a very strong bhakti background who can't actually come into Gyan properly because the bhakti background interferes with it. And if you have had no bhakti background and you don't have any of the, it's like when you are indoctrinated with some ideas, that indoctrination goes very deep and it affects you emotionally, and it affects your assumptions. And if you have not had any indoctrination, then that part is not there. It hasn't been put into your system, your intellectual system. And that makes it easier for you to tell the difference between what Baba's saying and what the indoctrination is, because you know both of them neutrally. For example, if you are raised in a particular religion which tells you have to believe this, and then they make you believe it, like if you don't believe it, that's a sin, and if you do believe it, then God will be happy with you. But they prevent you from processing ideas. So if you are prevented from processing ideas, then you're also prevented from processing Gyan, because it works both ways. So to undo the indoctrination of bhakti, first thing you have to do is to be able to pinpoint exactly what the indoctrination is that you were indoctrinated with. And that's a very, very big majority of people who are raised in a religious way. And there are a few people who are not raised in a religious way. And the religious people believe, with or without any evidence, that people who are not raised in a religious way must by definition be sinful. And that people who are raised in a religious way must by definition be non-sinful. But the reality is, or the evidence shows, that it's not true. But if you are indoctrinated with an idea and you believe that idea to be true, to undo that is a big piece of work. And how yoga works in this is that when you have yoga means that you churn the knowledge very deeply to a point where your concentration on the knowledge gives you an insight. And that insight shines a light for you that there is a difference between what Baba is saying and the indoctrination, which up until that insight moment you didn't see. So then you see it, and once you see it, you drop it because you see it's not real, you see. And this is another reason why Baba says you should never tell people not to do bhakti, which by extension means you should never tell anybody that their interpretation of Gyan is wrong, because they won't know what to do with that statement. But if you can see clearly, and you can see the extent to which other people can't see clearly, because you already passed by all that. It's a road, and it's a road which takes you slowly from not understanding something to understanding something. But if you don't see something, nobody can make you see it. And so why Baba encourages us to do this practice in this particular way is because it's like a method which makes it possible for you to have these moments of insight when you do the meditation accurately. An accurate meditation is represented very well in this picture, which I mention time to time, the 4 stages of yoga, where you have to take a theme from the Murli and meditate on it. You see, so most BKs do not do any of this. Most BKs take their bhakti prayers and whatever they learned in bhakti, chanting and mantras and all of this, and they transpose it over to Gyan, and they do the same thing. You know, sometimes in the Murli, Baba will say that meditation is not repeating the word Shiva, 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 right? So sometimes comes in the Murli. And why does he say that? Is because people do that. And he says, no, that's not. And then there are a lot of people who teach meditation. Okay, I'm a soul, you are God, you know, like that, very, very superficial. And then there's a lot of people, they sit there in front of Shiv Baba's picture and they expect some miracle to happen, and they will sit and wait until it does, which occasionally it might light up or something, and then they say, we meditated. And some people, they listen to meditation commentaries and they feel very nice after that. But none of those things is actual meditation, because you will not get this shifting of your consciousness through that. And so the meditation that is better is to churn the knowledge, because the knowledge is what is in Shiv Baba's mind, combined with the different comments of Brahma Baba, these two together. Now, Shiv Baba has declared that Brahma Baba knows how to meditate. So he knows. So this combination of what Shiv Baba says and what Brahma Baba says takes you in the right way. And the knowledge that Shiv Baba gives and the comments that Brahma Baba gives are like a road. You know, he talks about gat mat, tumhara gat mat nyara hai, which is always translated as your ways and means are unique. Nobody can understand a sentence like that in English. But what it means is where you're taking us and how we get there is totally different from what the religious people are doing. And so it's a very important statement to consider, because as an initiation of meditation, you need to distinguish between what the religious people teach as prayer and etc., different methods of activity, religious activity, and be clear about the difference of what those people are telling you to do and what Shiv Baba is telling you to do. Because Raj Yoga is something that you do in your mind. And so what this is called also Gyan Yoga. And Gyan Yoga means the yoga of knowledge. And so second chapter of the Gita is also entitled Yoga of Knowledge. And in that second chapter, it talks specially about the soul. And so the first lesson that you get in the 7 days course is you are a soul. And then you say, okay, what's that? And Some people, they feel stupid because they don't know what it is. Actually, they're very intelligent because it's very difficult to really know what a soul is. Because the first step of Raj Yoga meditation is to question your identity. You see, in religion, your identity is you're a male or a female, and you're a sinner, and you can't perceive God. That's what they tell you. You have to remember God, but you can't. But you have to. Shiv Baba says that's going to destroy your intellectual capabilities if you are taught like that. So he knows that it's indoctrination. And indoctrination is a system that destroys free thought. And so, to be Shiv Baba and deal with the humans is really very difficult. Yet he knows what he has to do. And he knows it takes a very, very long time to free people from the chains of indoctrination, because they are chains. And people, if they get a point of the Murli, which is actually clearly in their mind different from what they have believed up until now, it is very disturbing, because your loyalty has been to your religion. And if you go against that loyalty to your religion, you feel very uncomfortable doing that. And so it's a huge risk for a person to actually take on what Shiv Baba is saying, you see, which is against what you have been raised to believe. And somebody who has not had much religious indoctrination doesn't have that problem, which means it's a lot easier. And then the other thing that influences people a great deal is public opinion. You see, because when you're growing up, you're raised in your social and religious context. And all the people around you, your family, your school, your society, whatever, has a mandate to make sure that you comply with that social system. And they feel that if they don't do that, they're doing something wrong. And if they do that, they're doing the right thing. So if you are raised in a situation like that, then you also believe all those things in that way. And you see, if you come to God, and you can see this historically, all the great spiritual masters were outcasts because they didn't comply with religion. Not because they were bad, but because they were on a higher level. And so definitely they will get made into outcasts. So it's what you're dealing with. And then Baba says, okay, this is incognito. Whatever is going on in your mind, that's private, right? But whatever is going in your mind will be visible in your vibration and in your response to what's going on around you, your activity. So when Baba says you have to be yog-yukt and yukti-yukt, then it also includes that you are not part of that world of indoctrinated people, but you live with them and you are surrounded by them, and you have been programmed, really programmed to feel a certain way around these social systems. And then with Raj Yoga, you start to neutralize that indoctrination. And so therefore, they cannot reach you using the normal methods to trigger compliance by making you feel guilty. I see. So it's a very, very extraordinarily revolutionary method that he's giving us to be able to be free. And so when we take up this expression Jivan Mukti, it really means that you are in life surrounded by all these indoctrinated people, but you are not indoctrinated, and you are immune to all of the peer pressure and so on and so forth. And of course, you have to be immensely spiritually powerful to handle that, because they will detect that you are escaping from the indoctrination, and they will feel very uncomfortable about that, because when you escape from it, it gives them the feeling that they might not be right. And that makes them feel very afraid, because a person feels secure, very secure, when they think that they are right. And you remember one very interesting thing that Baba had said as a definition of arrogance, which is again the opposite of humility. So the arrogance is indicated by I am right. So the people who are indoctrinated, they definitely feel I am right in all of the elements of the indoctrination. And if they see someone who is close to God, but not indoctrinated, that's very scary for them, very scary. And I experienced this very clearly when I was in the Vatican in Rome discussing with the priests there, because they said to me at the end of our discussion, they said, well, we can see that you are called by God, but he did not call you to be a Christian. And that, what is this? You know, very, very disturbing for them, because on one hand, they could see something, and on the other hand, it went totally against their beliefs. So, and that's their profession. So very difficult to deal with that. And so all of us will find ourselves in this kind of situation. The more your yoga is right, the more you have to be very yukti-yukt. Yukti-yukt is this ability to function in a social context where your ideas and everybody else's ideas are diametrically opposed. And that can happen a great deal on the within the BK world, because very, very few BKs, Daddy Janki used to say like 95% of BKs are not in Gyan, not able to meditate because of this. They will take their bhakti background and Gyanify it, and they will continue that way. Nothing wrong, but it's nevertheless a context where these insights that you get through yoga will take you to another level. And the Deities did that. And people would be very clear that these are real good yogis. And because they were identified by Baba, and they were the first, and they were up there, within the BK world, they could manage pretty well when it's small world. But when it's a very big world, now it's become a very big world, then the quantity of real yogis is very, very tiny. And not necessarily in positions that are ahead, And so this is a very, very interesting context to work with, so that you carry your yoga forward very well in a context of people for whom you may be a cause of discomfort because you're really outside that indoctrination. Can you feel what I'm saying? So now I don't know the solution to it other than keep going. But I think what's very important is to notice where someone can succeed in diminishing you or disempowering you. And a lot of it has to do with this expression, humility. Because people who are indoctrinated will consider your spiritual power as ego. And they will give you a hard time about it because they will feel, I am right and you are arrogant. And if you think that they are right, you will allow them to diminish you and disempower you, and this will prevent you from moving forward, which means that they will succeed in their efforts. That's okay. But one fine day, you need to get to a point where you see it. Because once you see it, then you don't buy it. And when you don't buy it, you're immune to it. The people can tell you as much as they want how arrogant you are. You say, okay, well, you're welcome to your opinion, but it won't get in. It won't succeed in making you doubt yourself. And that means that you have become immune to that. You say that it's a kind of Maya because it's not true. So it goes under the section of Maya. When somebody accuses you of arrogance incorrectly, and you assume that you have to be humble in the way that they want you to be humble, which means that you have to give away your power and make yourself diminished and comply with that, then you're going against Shiv Baba. And he will say, okay, we must extend the kalpa, we must postpone the destruction until the BKs wake up, It's understandable. And yet at the same time, it's very important to think about this and actually achieve that kind of immunity to this indoctrination, because that's really karmatit. And that's what we're aiming for.
So I have a question on the point which you made on the Vatican City when you were talking to the maybe priests there. So you mentioned they had a moment where they said like, oh, you are sent from the God or something.
You're called by God.
You're called by God.
They said, you're called by God, but he didn't call you to be a Christian.
Yeah.
So that's disturbing to them because they cannot imagine, and these are Jesuits, they cannot imagine that God would call you not to be a Christian. God will call you, that's fine, but he will call you to be a Christian, because otherwise, if God calls you to be something that's not a Christian, yet you're raised in Christianity, that means that's the very scariest thing that could happen to them. Now, when you're afraid, it doesn't wake you up. How do you wake up? Is after you have got past your fear and taken a risk and seen that you took a risk, the sky did not fall on your head, then you can give yourself permission to open your eyes. But it's a big deal. It's a very big deal.
But it triggered the possibility that it is possible not to be Christian and still be called by God.
It's possible, but for these people whose function is to ensure that the whole world knows that everybody has to be Christian because that's the right religion. So that means it's very, very hard for them to take in that there is such a thing which is contrary to their assumptions, you see. And Baba has said that now all the conflicts will be religious conflicts, and you can see in your own practice, in your own environment, whether it's BK environment or your Lokic Hindu environment or whatever, this is the big thing. It's a very big deal. And you can understand that in the beginning of the Yagya, when Baba was talking all these things that corresponded exactly to the scriptures. You have to be pure, and remember God, not anybody else. Yet, it went against the conventions, it went against the indoctrination, and they wanted to kill him. And the only reason he didn't get killed is because the British controlled the legal system. Otherwise, Om Shanti, no BKs. Because that community is strong. The same situation happened for Jesus. Who he got crucified by was the authorities of the Jewish religion, not the Roman political leaders. But the difference is the Romans said, you deal with it. This is your people. You deal with it. They didn't. But in India, the British said, sorry, not allowed, is against the law. And so he left for Karachi. And there was an interesting story which came on the Avyakti Parivar from Ganga Dadi, where she said that Brahma Baba told everyone that he was going, he invited people to come to Karachi for a month, to stay with him for a month. And so they were not going permanently, they were going for a month. This happened to us, myself and Chandruban. Oh, you go to America for 2 months, still here, 40 years later. So this was the system. You go for a little while and then you don't come back, basically. That was the method that was used.
Well, mentioning about the roses and thorns, you said something that's, if I heard it properly, undo boundaries or something like that.
What I said is that the thorns represent boundaries, but the indoctrination actually causes you to not have boundaries, and you allow yourself to be invaded. And what Baba is saying is set boundaries so that you can't be invaded. And it's very difficult to set boundaries in front of people who think that they have a right to control you. You see, and the big problem that happened in the beginning of the Yagya, more than anything, was that the girls announced, I will not get married. Who gave you the right to think? They said. So who gave them the right to think? God. So it really became God against the religious authorities. And the religious authorities, when they come in direct conflict with God, that is unthinkable. It is unbearable. It is out of range. It is impossible to conceptualize that the religious authorities and God would be in opposition. And yet it very clearly says in the Gita that I come to take out the religions. So there are just certain things that are in the scriptures which the authorities of religion sort of don't quote, and they don't encourage people to study the scriptures. They encourage people to listen to what they say. And so you get people who really do study the scriptures, they will find out stuff and then challenge. But if you are indoctrinated, you're afraid to challenge. So why there was a problem between the Catholics and the Protestants in Christianity in the first place is because in Catholicism, they say that whatever the Pope says is infallible because he's the representative of Christ. And that if you consider that what he's saying is not right, then that makes you no longer a Christian. And then the Protestants said, sorry, the Pope is not infallible. And so they split, you see. And while I was there in the Vatican, they took me to the Vatican Library, where they have everything from everywhere, everything. And they took me right to the works of Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was a big, great scholar in Germany from 500 years ago. That was Martin Luther King. And this was Martin Luther, who Martin Luther King was named after. But Martin Luther was the philosopher who challenged Catholicism in Germany. And he was saying he had many contentions, but one which is quite famous is that the Catholic Church does not have the right to sell absolution of sins in exchange for money. And whether the Pope says it or not is not right. So thank you very much, and Om Shanti. That means you pay money and then your sins will go away. Excuse me, that's not going to work. To the church. Ah, yes. One of Martin Luther's main objections was the sale of what was called indulgences. And indulgence was a document that stated that the person's sins were absolved, and that was in exchange for a sum of money. Well, you see, if you're religious and you believe the Pope is infallible, then you're not going to question it. And it was a very, very hierarchical feudal system in Europe at that time. And if you question anything of anybody who's further up on the ladder, you are finished. They will kill you. So what happens when anything goes from sato to rajo to tamo? You get these two things, the sexual misbehavior and the financial misbehavior. And so in Baba's Yagya, there are rules to keep these two things in order. If you break these things, then you contaminate the Yagya. So Baba says, no, we can't break these things. Right? Because everything is supposed to go down, golden age, silver age, copper age, iron age, but in confluence age, it's supposed to go up. You go from Tamo Pradhan to Rajo to Sato Pradhan, but it means that you're going against a very, very substantial force, which is sending you to Tamo Pradhan. So if your yoga is not adequate, you will go down. And if you don't know how to do adequate yoga, you don't even start going up. So it seems to me very helpful if we understand how to do adequate yoga, and then you have to get a lot of strength to do it, because you have to resist. One thing is this weight of your sin, which I pressure, then the weight of everybody else's sin, which is a very big pressure. Then you have the weight of the indoctrination, which is a very big pressure, and, you see. So you have to be stronger than all of that. And Shri Baba says that I do have enough strength to give you to be stronger than all of that, but you have to also be strong enough to get it and hold it and maintain it and sustain it. And that is not called very easy. But I don't know. I'm telling you these things so that you can see that it's quite a serious practice. And when we want to have hundreds and millions of BKs, you can't expect that many to do this practice at that level. So Baba says there are roses, jasmines, other type of flowers, and uk flowers. And so it is like that. But then you ask yourself, okay, at which level do I wish to practice this? And then at which level am I able to practice this? And then to increase it, what is needed? That's really the thing.
Does indoctrination happen only through religious beliefs or through societal beliefs, family beliefs?
Well, I think that
History.
religious beliefs, societal, and family is all one thing. And because you see, if you take Hinduism as an example, and Judaism is also done in the same way, that your identity and your religion is not different. Your society is according to the way, and in Christianity, there's more possibility for a difference between your function in the society and your religious identity, a little bit more difference. But in Hinduism, in Judaism, in Islam, you can't. Because the pressure from the religious authorities to be that is very, very strong. In United States, where we are living, there is a law which says a church and state have to be separate. And in France, there is that law as well. And in England, the head of the church is the queen or the king. It's called Anglican religion. So it's like that. And in Germany, the southern part is very Catholic. The northern part is very Protestant. Martin Luther was the northern part. And in Italy, Catholic. In Spain, Catholic. Poland, heavily Catholic. Russia, Russian Orthodox, you know. And during communism, there was no Christianity. But with Putin, it became strong Christian, Russian Orthodox. So and what Baba tells us is he's creating the Lakshmi and Narayan double crown, the religious authority and the political authority in one hand. And in the United States, they made this law, and in France also, because it's too dangerous because the people at the top are corrupt. And if you have the corrupt people holding the political and the religious powers, then that is the most extreme form of tyranny possible, and that's unacceptable. Yet, in United States, there are many politicians who say this is a Christian country. Actually, that's an unconstitutional statement, but they do, you know. And you remember in the education system, unless it's a religious school, you're not allowed to bring in any of these religious ideas into the United States education system. And then it meant that the education system had to be very focused on just like scientific stuff, which is non-religious. And then people said, but if you take out the religious part, then you take out the morality. And then you get humanists who say, the human being is naturally good. And so you don't need religion in order for there to be goodness in the society. You just need to focus on the natural goodness of people, I see. And so these are all these conflicts that come up because people know what they know only to the extent that they know it. And when Baba says to us, okay, I am the knowledgeable one, I know everything, and I tell you all the information about the material world and the spiritual world. He's called the truth. So he tells us this, but the truth is so unacceptable when you have thought that what is untrue is true. And when you get faced with the truth, it's unbearable. And so there is the expression, the awful truth. And awful is like God. You have awe of God. If you're a religious person, you're afraid of God. And so it's a very difficult situation for people to find themselves in. And every BK will hopefully find themselves in that situation, because then you have to make a choice. And the choice is, are you going to, when you come into a conflict in your own self between what you believe from your Lokic life and what Baba says, which side are you going to be on? Because you have to decide. You can't be on both sides. And this is why this was very much the case in the beginning of the Yagya. Now all these differentiations are heavily blurred, because if you don't blur it, you can't get lots of people, and they wanted lots of people. But now that you've got lots of people and all these lines are blurred, then the integrity of the Yagya is impacted. So it gives you a different problem. And so now the thing to consider is, okay, where do I stand? You know, who am I? Where do I stand?
2 days back in the Murli, there was a statement that you go to the villages and you do service, and then you create subjects, and that's how you become king.
Mm.
So is that why the literal translation was to create more people, to have more numbers? Because like, what does Baba actually mean when he says that sentence in today's time?
He says, and this is in the context of Gandhi, okay? Social service, politics. So what he says, if you see the picture of the ladder, not this one, but the original one, where he talks about the religio-political rise and fall of India. And this Raj Yoga is religio-political. And he says he's making you into kings. So here we live in a country which got rid of kings and had a war about that and established a republic. And so in India, where Baba's talking very specifically for India, and also he says that you're not going to create a kingdom in America or Russia or China or Europe or Africa. You are creating a kingdom in India. And the overwhelming number of BKs is Indians, whether in India or Indian diaspora somewhere else. And so if you serve people, that's called social service. So when you serve people from a political point of view, you do something which benefits them. Now, in BK, how do you benefit people is you enable people to be soul conscious and God conscious and teach them pure karma, etc., which means that you have served them. And when you serve someone, it makes them subjects of you because they're beneficiaries. And so when you benefit people, according to the laws of karma, you will become the king of those people because it's a consequence of benefiting people. And so this is what is said. Now, the thing is, you may do a lot of service, but the question is, did you benefit people? Because if you benefit someone, then they will honor you, right? If you do charity, you're a wealthy person, you do charity, you benefit a lot of people, you arrange for their education, their facilities, whatever, then you rise up in the hierarchy. This is a human system is like that. So whoever benefits becomes the king. Now what has happened in the Iron Age is that instead of the kings being beneficiaries of people, they take. And so it's upside down. And this, you remember in today's Friday, yeah? Yesterday I had this not yesterday, the previous Thursday, I had this scene of the hat being upside down. And it's also symbolic for this, that if you are taking from the people, you're in a position of power, but you're abusing power. So maybe what can happen very easily is you do a lot, you benefit a lot of people, and you come to a position of power, and then instead of continuing to be beneficial, you reverse it and you start to desire more power. And in the process, you start taking from the country or taking from the people instead of benefiting the people. So this is where your hat gets turned upside down. And so in BK, he wants us to serve people. But if you serve people and you get all sorts of people, like we have a center, lots of centers, and lots of people, and they give you lots of money and this and that, and then you say, I'm the king of the castle. And then you start to become arrogant, you see. So this is an example of what Baba said not to do. You have to have humility. That is to say, you have to understand that you got this position not because of you, but because God gave you power. And he will check how you handle it. Do you know how to manage power, or do you get corrupted by it? So if you get corrupted by it, then go to the bottom of the class. But if you know how to handle it, that means that you will not abuse it. You will make sure that you're a trustee. Daddy Janki used to talk a lot about how Brahma Baba was a very excellent trustee, because yes, he was the top. He never abused the power. But not everybody is immune to abusing power. It's very easy. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when you're in a position of power, and Shiv Baba tests his children who he wants to make into kings to see who is going to be a tyrant and who is going to be, the very good king, who is the provider, the defender, the protector, the one who ensures that everybody has what they need. That is a good king. But somebody who just wants to be up, 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 and everybody else down, 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 that's not a good king. And so among all the people who are candidates in the University of Spiritual Knowledge to be kings, he will see who understands what is a king and who didn't get it right and got corrupted. And then he will grade accordingly. And this is why he says that in the end, when all the results are out, there may be some surprises. Because you may get someone who's in a physically high position, but they have abused their power, then they would take a low position. Or someone who is just going along simply, but they're doing everything correctly, and they pass with honor, they get a high position. Yeah, Latin was only allowed to be learned in the Catholic Church by those in positions of power. Exactly right. They put everything into Latin, all the scriptures. They made all the services in Latin. Nobody could understand. So the priest had absolute power, and everybody else was blind faith. And that's called indoctrination. So yes.
The translation of the word nimit in one word, it is translated as instruments, but do you have
another word?
Another.
Well, I mean, these terms that Baba uses, we have to think about. When they first come up, they get translated. And so the translators will think, how shall we translate this word? They will meet about it and they will say, okay, this is a good translation, and then it becomes fixed. But nevertheless, the word nimit is something that you can sit with. You can look through the different dictionaries, because you see, in those days, there weren't dictionaries. Now there are. And so you can go onto the internet. There's one that I find quite good, Shabdakosh, sorry. And there they give you a lot of alternatives for the individual words, because translation has to take into consideration the context where this word nimit is used. You know, in BK nowadays, they use the word instruments for coordinators, you see. So this is like this, that you took a word which sounds good, which everybody has a lot of faith in, and then you put that word on somebody who's in power, who may or may not be what that word means. And in that way, you change the meaning of a word by usage, you see, because language is dynamic. And that creates a problem, because people will use words to their advantage and somebody else's disadvantage. And they also avoid accountability. And so this is always a problem, always. And therefore, meditation means you think about it deeply. So what is the meaning of instrument? You see, nowadays, instrument has come to mean the boss, but that's the opposite of what it actually means. But you see how the meaning of the word is changed by the usage. And so if it goes to the opposite of its original meaning, then part of thinking about it is to go back to the original meaning. An instrument means that if you're a musical instrument, like a violin, for example, now violin doesn't play itself. The violin is played by the player of the violin. So this word instrument refers to, you have made a contract with God that you've invited him to use you as he wishes, and you will not interfere in that. That is instrument. And I don't think one word will be a good solution. We have to give a description of what it means. And so these days, people use the word manmat when you are using your own ideas instead of Baba's ideas, but that's not actually the meaning of manmat. So all these words that come to be jargon words have also changed their meaning because of usage. And people use these words to amplify their convenience. And that's just human nature. Human nature is like that, but we're trying to have divine nature or something like that. So anyway, the context is all the time trying to take us away from this essence. And every so often we have to really think about it.
Nimit and then
Nirman?
nirmal was arrogance, not
No, one
lack
of them is
Huh.
arrogance. One of them is creator.
Yeah.
One of them is humble.
Ah.
Okay, so if you are an instrument for Shiv Baba, then creation will happen. Because he's the creator. He wants creation to happen double quick, you know, and BK's are real slow. That's the way it goes. Well, are you moving as fast as you would like to? I don't see anybody saying yes, because there's so much resistance, so much. And Shiv Baba says, let's go, cycle is finishing, come on, come on. And we say, yeah, right, we will. Yeah, we're getting old, you know. That's right. Okay, there's one. I'm struggling with the information that the Golden Age, we will not remember having companionship with Chief Baba, and that he's our source, but we forget him once we've been purified. Does not seem very pure. Well, I can't figure out how to ask a question about what I just wrote above. Maybe you can address my thought, though. Yes, definitely. Let me know who I'm talking to. Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer. Well, this is, I think, a very interesting example of how our background creates assumptions. For example, if somebody has a background of Christianity, in Christianity, the idea is God is in heaven, right? And so if God's in heaven, then when you go to heaven, you go and you spend time with God, and then there's lots of angels along with God, and that's heaven. And then Sheep Baba says, well, you know, the thing is this, that I actually only go to hell. But nobody imagines that if you go to hell, you'll find God there, because when they go to hell, they find godlessness, you know. But then he says, well, I'm the one who's famous for establishing heaven, and I establish heaven at the end of the cycle when it's really hell. And also he mentions this law, which is there in Hindu spiritual information somewhere, that you only remember God when you're in trouble, which is pretty much the case. And so people remember God because he gets them out of trouble. It's a last resort. And then he sends us to heaven and says, okay, you go to heaven, but once you're in heaven, you start the process of decline again. And he cannot go there, because if he would go there, he would also decline. And then by the time you get to hell, there'd be nobody to bring you up. So he has to stay out of the cycle. Otherwise, he cannot do his work. So his work is to come at the confluence age, at the end of the cycle, take everybody, purify everyone, take out everybody's sins and all that, and put them in heaven. And then he says, I go in retirement because I'd done my job. And I wait until the Copper Age, where the devotees start to ask for him again. And then he gives some response, but he doesn't actually come until this time. So the ideas in Christianity about God, and all the Abrahamic religions about God being in heaven, is actually not true. And then if you tell them there's no God in heaven, then they say, well, why would we want to go to heaven then in that case? And then he will say, well, anyway, you don't go to heaven because you come later. And they say, what? So it's very problematical. So we have to go slowly, step by step, to really understand what's going on here, what he's talking about, and who he is, you know. So it's a day by day we get a little bit further along.
So she said that we don't remember God. That doesn't seem very pure.
Right,
like that.
Yes. We don't remember God, but we are very pure. It may not seem very pure, but it's like, it's not about whether it's pure or not. It's that he's telling us something that nobody had thought of. And when you hear something that nobody had thought of, you associate with what you know. And it's a very deep belief in the Abrahamic traditions that when you die, you go to heaven and God is there. And then he says, well, there are more details. because when you die, you reincarnate. And when you die finally at the end of the cycle, then you go to the soul world, and depending on how much you did and what you did in the confluence age, you will go to heaven at the beginning or a little bit further on, and you will be in heaven and you won't even think about God because you don't have any trouble. And there were many people who argued with him about that. And they said, you know, I mean, we want to remember you in heaven. And he said, okay, you go to heaven and see. If you want to call me to heaven, I'll come. But I doubt if you will call me, because you will be in heaven and you won't have any need for me. And so Jennifer's question is a very important question, because there are so many people whose belief and knowledge about God is centered around the idea that he's in heaven, you know. And then this question, where is God? Like they said in the Murli today, people do not know his time, place, date, etc., etc. They do not know that he lives in the soul world, which is not heaven. And they do not know that he comes in hell, which is not heaven. And they do not know that when he's finished making heaven, he goes back home and we go to heaven, but he doesn't come there. Nobody knows that. Nobody would even conceive about that. And if you tell them that, they say it's your imagination, because it doesn't correspond to what they have been indoctrinated with. They don't even know they've been indoctrinated. They say indoctrination is for other people. They think we've been indoctrinated. Okay. You know. So doctrine is a belief, and based on, you have to see what it's based on. It's based on inspiration or some scripture or something, you know, they came up with it. Yes, Jennifer, it is a huge shift. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, is, yeah, definitely a reference to meditation, being in the soul world. Absolutely right. Okay, we've gone way past our time, so we better stop, right? Or, yes. So, what an amazing Murli. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.